The river is deep and dark, and it holds many secrets. At least that's what they say. And recent events have left me with a completely unshakable belief that what they say is entirely true. There's a river that runs through that part of the city that I live and work in. It's got a proper name, but everyone just calls it the river anyway. Originally it was outside the city limits, but as the city grew, the boundaries pushed ever outwards, eventually spanning both sides and beyond. My part of the city has a lot of steel and glass and concrete used in construction. It was built during a fairly soulless period, architecturally speaking. There are a lot of high-density apartment blocks in my area. I live on a middle floor of one of them. The apartment has a view of the river from the window. Sometimes I'll sit and look at it, wondering what's going on under that deceptively calm surface. I never look for too long. The river has a peculiar way of being able to give you chills. The river isn't that wide, but it's deep and has strong currents, especially near the bottom. Nobody swims in it. The current makes it too dangerous, and the water is very, very cold, even during the hottest of summer days. My work is in one of the office buildings on the other side of the river from my apartment. It's close enough for me to walk, and there's a scenic riverside pathway that the city council built during the expansion, envisioning a bustling riverside precinct. This didn't happen. People avoid the river if they can all help it. But when quizzed about it, nobody really knows why. You'll get the odd tourist going for a walk alongside it, but they never linger for long. Even the ducks and other waterfowl seem to avoid it. My walk to and from work would be probably 10 minutes quicker if I went along the riverside, but I cut through the city streets where there's people, and the only part of my walk where I get close to the river is where I cross it, walking quickly along the utilitarian concrete bridge as traffic passes. The drivers always have their eyes set dead ahead of them. Nobody ever looks at the water. I tend to speed up as I cross the bridge. It's not particularly high, and there's a well-sized concrete guardrail. But I really don't like being above the water if I can help it. If you look over the side, sometimes the surface seems so dark that it's almost black. It's impossible to see the bottom. If you look really closely, then sometimes you'll see dark shapes moving rapidly throughout the gloom of the water. But it's impossible to see if they're just big fish or something else. I live a fairly quiet life, all things considered. I've got good friends, a girlfriend, and a steady, well-paying, well-ish paying office job. I like my apartment, I like my friends, I like the city I live in. I have no problems with the way things are going. All in all, I'm a fairly normal guy. But I don't like that damn river, not one bit. I've never felt comfortable near it, and things have been a whole lot more unsettling since that night. I'd stayed late at work on a Friday to finish up some stuff that I'd been putting off. Normally I'd have been out of there at 5 p.m. off to meet my girlfriend for date night, but she was out of town for the weekend, off to stay with her parents. The plan was to pick up some pizza or Chinese on the way home, and to settle down on the couch for a relaxing night watching crappy horror movies. I leaned back in my chair at work, looking around the empty office. I just finished up the last of my paperwork, so I shut down my computer and glanced out the window, catching the flickering of the streetlights as they came on outside. The sun was just on the verge of setting, so you could see the harsh artificial light from the streetlights in the half-darkness. I was trying to decide between pizza and Chinese on my way down the lift, and settled on a large pizza to myself as an acceptable option, making a mental note to do extra cardio at the gym the next day. I stepped out of the lift, shouldered my bag, and headed towards the building exit, wishing the night security guard a good weekend as I went. Making my way out onto the street, I took a moment to appreciate the fresh, cool air that came with the evening of a day that's had fine weather. I called ahead to a pizza place near my house as I headed towards a bridge, placing my order for pickup. Large meat lovers pizza, double meat, extra barbecue sauce. I'd figured I'd have maybe 5 minutes to wait at the pizza place before the pickup, and then I could head to mine and settle in for the night. All was well as I wandered along the street, taking a left after a few blocks and heading towards the river. I noticed I was the only person who seemed to be out and about. The entire area seemed pretty much deserted. Not entirely surprising, given it was probably 7 p.m. on a Friday night and I was in the business area of town. All the bars and restaurants are across the river on the side that I live. The night air was still and cool, and the sky was rapidly darkening. The sidewalks lit by the bright, harsh light from the street lights above. My pace quickened as I took a left and headed towards the bridge. The streets were still deserted, but I could hear faint noise from the restaurant precinct across the river. I kept my head down as I stepped onto the bridge, intently staring at the pavement as I made my way across. As I reached the halfway point, I felt a chill settle over me and I froze in place. The noise from across the river had stopped. In fact, I couldn't hear anything in the way of street or bird noise. I couldn't even hear the buzz of the street lights anymore. The only thing I could hear was the water of the river rushing along the pylons of the bridge, and then I heard what sounded like a sob. I looked to the other side of the bridge and then back towards the home side of the river that I was heading towards, and I caught something in my peripheral vision. I turned towards it and took an involuntary step backward in shock. I saw something I'd swear hadn't been there a second ago. There was a girl sitting on the guardrail facing towards the river, feet dangling on the side. Shit, I said to myself, quietly breathing deeply and trying to slow my suddenly racing heart. Man, you scared me. Sorry, I completely missed that you were sitting there. I took a step towards her. Are you okay? She had long dark hair that seemed to be wet. It hung down over the side of her face, hiding her features. She was wearing a simple white dress that ended at her knees, and I could see through gaps in the concrete railing that she had bare feet. Her hands were resting on the rail she was sitting on, and they too seemed to be damp, putting some moisture on the concrete they were placed on. I couldn't see her face because of the hair, but her shoulders were hunched forwards and seemed to be shaking slightly, as if she was holding back tears. I couldn't see her face to tell for sure she was young or older. She had a slim build. I figured she was in her mid-20s at the most. I took another step. Miss, I asked, reaching out a hand to touch her shoulder. She stopped shaking, and I stopped moving forward before my hand could touch her. She was cold, so very cold that it seemed to be radiating out from her. I drew my hand back with a shiver, grabbing it with the other hand to warm it up. She seemed to notice my presence and straightened up, turning towards me as she did. I tensed with apprehension, suddenly worried about what her face might look like, but relaxed as it came into view. She was a pretty normal-looking girl in her late teens, early 20s, and the only out-of-the-ordinary thing I could see was that her eyes were red. I assumed from crying. Are you okay? I asked her again. Do you need any help? The corners of her mouth curled up slightly in a sad, wan smile. And then she turned back, looked down at the water, gave a little hop, and jumped off the side of the bridge. I stood there for a second, completely dumbfounded. Then I heard a splash in the river below, and it snapped me out of my stupor. Jesus, I exclaimed, throwing off my satchel and running towards the edge of the bridge.